Oh, no, it's not. Who's that? Oh, yeah. We're on? It's just about there. Just got a few seconds to go. Good afternoon, councillors and staff and people gathering to listen to the discussion and those online. Welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that we are meeting on Wednesday because of the public holiday declared by the Prime Minister of Australia, and therefore a few of our councillors had work commitments and couldn't make it, in particular Councillor Harris, Stosnicek and Priest, so they are apologies for this meeting. A reminder that we're on air, so those that are listening at home and for those that are in the room here, if you keep your mobiles off, we would appreciate that, as it refrains from interruption, and we do want people to be able to hear what's happening as well. So please be seated. Thank you. No other apology. Oh, no. So, declaration of interest. I have one for 9.3. Any other declaration of interest? No. Confirmation of the minutes. Somebody have to move the minutes of the meeting held 8th of September. Moved Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor Spencer. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. No council workshops have been identified. Councillors' leave of absence, none. So community reports. Is David here? Yep. I haven't seen him. Welcome, David.
Welcome. Thank you. Mr Mayor and ladies and gentlemen, I'd just like to read a report I sent out just recently. My name is David Brooks. I'm the founder and president of the Veterans and Community Wood Centre. What you should know about the shed. I'm writing to the association or organisation or clubs to inform you of our shed, the Veterans Community Wood Centre, located at Unamina Avenue, Kings Meadows. It's a not-for-profit organisation and run by volunteers and veterans. We have been in the location for the past 5 years. Although we started back in 2009, we are one of 72 sheds in Tasmania, and we belong to the Tasmanian Men's Shed Association. The shed is well established, having 51 members on its books, open Tuesday, Wednesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 4 p.m. on those days. Our machinery is modern, safe and up to date. The workshop, through the support of both Youngtown and Kings Meadows Rotary, assisted by the Launceston City Council, have grown bigger over the past years. 2 further extensions have been added to accommodate a welding area, a storage, plus our most recent project for the new Launceston Tool Library. Just like a book library, the lending of tools to enable our community to access tools for the home projects without the expense. Just borrow for 7 days and return. The project will be opening very soon. Membership, there will be a fee, of course, plus consumable cost will be applicable. Our main objectives are to encourage our menfolk to join our shed activities, prevent isolation, loneliness, bring knowledge to others, learning new skills from various trades, work in wood turning, metalwork, painting, spray painting, and having some fun doing all these things. To be involved in the process of making these items for the shed and making orders for the community, repairing, restoration, making toys for young people, such as log trucks, jeeps, trains, hand-push toys, all handmade from wood, including our normal lazy Susans, trays, bowls, pens and trophies, and the like. We must be self-sustainable. Which brings me to the most important segment, your invitation to participate, attendance and involvement. Across the board, we are still getting to be known, and this is an opportunity not only for us to put ourselves out there, an even greater opportunity for your organisation, clubs, to attend and see firsthand what we actually do, to give you an insight as to our activities, That's all of them. And yes, generally show off our work to the public. I encourage you to inform your personnel of our existence and what we can offer to the community. Please give it some thought. Your club, your organisation may want a speaker to attend and bring items of interest and display. Be involved in activities such as site visits in smaller groups. This can be arranged. I'm sure that you would love to see toys being made and fun things involving wood and how they come together. I hope that I've uncovered enough items to catch your attention. And by the way, our group would be able to attend your functions, such as any fairs, fundraisers, as we carry a quantity of ready-made items both on display and for sale at our shed shop on site. Please give us some consideration to maybe assist your clubs or organisations in some way. And I appeal to businesses to consider supporting this community-based program by the way of tools and monitoring, etc. Signage would be welcome for your sponsorship and support. And our motto is, for the community, with the community. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for all the work you do. It's really appreciated, so I appreciate all the work you've done over many years. Getting to know you has been fantastic, and you work very hard. So well done, and continue the good work. Thank you very much. Cheers. Thanks for the report too. So we go into public question time. That's not public questions. I notice are there that I haven't had, but public question time, please.
Good, thank you. That's better. Mr. Mayor, all the councillors, I'm appealing to you today as in the humanness in you and to listen to the people. So the question, to do the questions, as you will well know, these aren't the questions. You will know by my anguish of about the approval for the destruction of that little treasure patch of biodiversity that has existed virtually untouched on the Launceston Golf Course and under the protection of state-sanctioned wildlife sanctuary status under our various Acts of Parliament. In the past weeks, I have heard of the council-sanctioned plan to tidy up Queechy Lakes, clear vegetation and remove the willows. This lake is another wonder of coexistence of water birds. Some of them are migratory and some of them are rare. They are living with us in our city. Pink-eared ducks, whistling ducks, nankeen night herons, a colony of cormorants and royal spoonbills, plus a myriad of other surprises. As a keen field naturalist, I wonder just where is the knowledge and the understanding and where is the advice coming from? And my question to Council is, how can and will the Council staff and the councillors show authenticity in enacting due diligence in the matter of looking after our natural values and the critical diversity of our urban areas and of our municipality?
Yeah, we'll take that on notice, thank you, and get a response.
Okay. Now, oddly, the second question is also about protecting biodiversity, but this time it relates to the homeless people camping in our parks. In Burke Street, near the ex-Lifelink building, Council have put a great and successful work into native rehabilitation planting against the Hillside Crescent Road construction. It has been thriving due partly to the care of us locals. However, as groups of people have variously moved into camp in this park, the successful swathe of kangaroo grass and some fledgling banksia trees have been ripped out to clear a space used for toileting and also for cooking. The question put to me so many times by these people is around, can you help us have a voice? To ask if Council could subsidise some covered space for setting up a sheltered refuge where small sleeping pods, safe lockers for personal items, phone charging stations, simple shower and toilet facilities could be provided. They see the large open space of the building on Bathurst Street used as a pre-polling place for the state election, vacant throughout all the cold and wet nights of winter. And they despair as they bear the disadvantages that have befallen them. So the question is, can council be subsidising some rental space to provide those services?
Yep. Dan Ryan, our General Manager, will answer that question. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. So the council already provides a space for homeless lockers to be located, and also provides access to toilet facilities. There are currently 5 portable toilet facilities in place across the city in various areas. Of course, our permanent facilities as well. We also provide free access to shower facilities with the assistance of the Benevolent Society at the former YMCA building. We are continuing to explore the provision of portable shower units, and we've also advanced our plans to redevelop the Royal Park toilet block to incorporate shower facilities, which we expect to commence early in the new year. Worth noting, we also provide phone charging stations throughout the CBD, and we're currently working with the provider to find a suitable location for a sleeping pod facility that's currently being constructed.
Thank you.
So my third question, the Gorge Hotel DA will be coming before you today. It's being touted by council and the developers as an iconic landmark building for Launceston. It is boasting that it is the last iconic precinct in Launceston, and it's immensely valuable for that. The DA is in essence for another pretentious hotel in a string of the same as part of an international hotel corporate chain. The proposal is certainly not for an opera house or a cultural adjunct to the educational precinct next door, and the claims to be complementing the intrinsic, dare I say, sacred nature of our truly iconic Cataract Gorge and the Tamar Estuary Basin. I have seen no national or international advertising or competition for seeking a grand design for this beautiful site. My question to councillors is, and it is inherent in my call by mail to you all this morning for a citizens' assembly, as a socially sophisticated way towards clearing the conflict, the cost, the angst and the pain to gain a true social licence for this large and bulky impost on our gentle cityscape as it is.
Thank you.
Sorry,
if you do that, we have to ask you to leave. There's no applause allowed in this. We're not here for a gallery.
Where were others provided this is a question, where were others provided that opportunity to contribute to the design for this special place? And thus, will you respond to my call for a citizens' assembly?
Yep, thank you. All of the councillors have heard that as well, so they can take that on board as well. And Dan, do you want to give a further explanation?
So specifically to the request for a citizens' assembly, so the answer is no. The development application for this proposal must be considered in accordance with the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, which really does provide scope for the establishment of a citizens' assembly.
And in fact, if we don't consider it today, it'll be a yes as passed anyway.
As I understand.
Thank you. Any further questions from the public?
Mr Mayor, Robin Smith, on behalf of Business in the Brisbane Street Mall.
Just get closer to the mic for those.
Coffee Republic, 137 Brisbane Street. And I've got 3 questions today, Mr Mayor. One about e-scooters, one about the Christmas tree, one about the Gorge Hotel. We're halfway through the scooter trial. I wondered if I hadn't heard a lot about it, if you can give us an update where that's at. It seems to have gone a bit quiet. And also statistics from, more specifically, if we can find out about 2-way trips. That's someone that takes a scooter into work or into the city, and then a return the same day out, which is, I understand, something that suggests it's...
We'll take that on notice because we haven't got those answers ready at the moment.
Thank you. Christmas tree. With the demise of City Prom, I think the council's taken over the Christmas tree in the Brisbane Street Mall, the city tree, if that's right. Could you give us an update if it's going into the mall? We never know if it is or not. If there's going to be an event in the Brisbane Street Mall, a lighting event as we've had in the past.
Over to Dan. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I can confirm we will be putting up the Christmas tree again, and we will be doing a lighting of the Christmas tree. We're currently working with stakeholders from what was City Prom and other organisations to coordinate some level of activity around that lighting event in late November.
An event, thank you. And third, the Gorge Hotel. From my understanding, and I don't have that much understanding of the processes, but the ancillary aspect to those things such as restaurants, bars, gym, pool, whatever those things are, a bottle shop, whatever, are they considered ancillary to a hotel such as that? Would that be fair to say? A five-star hotel would expect to have those things? From the planning aspect, I don't... To me, it would be. They're sort of commensurate with it, but I'm not sure. Are they looked at differently?
No, thank you. That's what we'll be discussing when we discuss the item. So if you're here for the item, you'll be able to hear the councillors' views on that and the comments that will be made during the debate.
Very well.
Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for your service. Mr Mayor, I understand you're not standing.
Thank you.
It's very much appreciated, and there's other councillors.
This is your last time you're coming then, is it? Before I go, just joking.
Good afternoon, Mayor Van Zetten. How are you? I've come this afternoon to, I put some questions on notice. I just want to ask what halls do the Launceston City Council...
Sorry? Name it.
Sorry. My name's Kirsten Ritchie, from Strike It Out Inc. And this afternoon I'd like to ask what halls do the Launceston City Council own that are not currently leased?
Yeah, we've got a detailed response. Do you want it now or do you want it in writing? Or...
You can have it now if you like.
Dan, thank you.
Afternoon, Kirsten. Nice to see you. So City of Launceston does have numerous halls that are not leased on a permanent basis. However, all of these are utilised in various ways and at various times by various community groups. So currently there are no suitable halls that are not being used in some capacity.
Okay, thank you, Dan. And which green spaces are available in the Launceston City area which could accommodate setting up a safe, secure area with mobile facilities such as portable toilets, showers, mobile kitchenette, to have the people who are homeless to set up their tents and have a safe space to sleep?
Dan, thank you.
So there are many green spaces in the municipal area of City of Launceston that we manage. However, as you know, there are many factors that need to be considered in regard to establishing a place such as that. So some of those factors incorporate potential impact on local business, residents and other community members who use that space, the requirement for existing infrastructure to support plumbing, safety and access, due consideration to the longevity of the site given the transient nature of the community, the ability to appropriately manage a site to ensure the safety and wellbeing of all of our community members, easy access for wraparound services and access to general services such as public transport, shops and medical facilities, and also the provision of appropriate visibility to support the safety needs of the homeless community. So while a thorough review of potential locations for such a site has been undertaken, with the above criteria in mind, the suggested approach is actually not one that is generally supported by others who are working within our Homeless Advisory Committee and engaged in that sector as well. Primarily that's due to the risk of creating an environment which is non-controlled that doesn't appropriately address the many varying and complex circumstances of individuals that are experiencing homelessness.
Right. And then whose responsibility is it to ensure the wellbeing of our community members are met with having provisions of basic amenities provided while sleeping rough available 24/7?
So addressing the complex issues of homelessness is really a community issue first and foremost. While the responsibility for the provision of public housing and mental health services rests with the state government, the City of Launceston does acknowledge that it also has a role to play in assisting with the facilitation of positive outcomes for the community, and is doing this in a collaborative manner through engagement with service providers, including state government, Tasmanian Police and community, through the Homelessness Advisory Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr Mayor and Council. My name is Jim Collier and I live at 39 Beach Road, Laguna. Okay to continue? Thank you. In view of the forthcoming local government elections, is Launceston City Council currently in caretaker mode?
Correct.
You are in caretaker mode?
Correct.
Thank you. In view of what you've just said, and referring to development application 0390/2022, the Gorge Hotel, is a very important development application for Launceston. So would it not be more appropriate, or indeed more ethical, to defer voting or discussing on this significant item until after the forthcoming local government elections?
Our caretaker policy is specifically clear that any major decisions on policy, but development applications must continue. And under the laws of this land, the Planning Authority, we're under the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, the Council is required to comply with LUPA statutory frames for determining development applications. Therefore, this policy cannot defer consideration of applications during the caretaker period, as it would be solely reliant on the applicant's willingness to grant extensions of time. We can't give that extension of time.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Any further questions?
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. I'm Andrew Cassidy from Strike It Out Inc. I was talking earlier about the 12 portable toilets. Where are they located? Do we know?
Oh, we do know. Dan, have you got a list there for you?
Hey Andrew, nice to see you. So there's not 12 portable toilets. We currently have 5 in circulation across the city. Most of these are located along some of the visible campsites that you may be aware of. However, not all of those locations have been publicly disclosed at the request of some people because of the risk to their health and safety. But 5 are in play across the Launceston CBD at the moment. We have had as many as 7.
It has been 4 months since the Launceston City Council said they were going to provide showers for people sleeping rough. How far away are those from being utilised, and where will they be situated?
Thank you. Dan?
So the City of Launceston has investigated many options for implementation of suitable shower facilities. However, due to supply issues and some of the infrastructure requirements, unfortunately, we haven't been able to progress this. We have been able to partner with service providers to support shower facilities at the old YMCA site. We've extended the opening hours of shower facilities at the Gorge. There are also existing shower facilities available at Morton's Place and Shop for Hope in the CBD, which is available to the homeless community as well. City of Launceston has also advanced plans to redevelop the Royal Park toilet block to incorporate some shower facilities, which we expect to kick off early in the new year.
But also we do have the showers at Kings Meadows.
Yeah, YMCA.
I don't know whether you said that. You did. Oh, sorry.
Right, and one last question. As we're deepening in the crisis for emergency accommodation, there seems to be no accommodation anywhere. And we've seen kids on the street that are sleeping rough in cars, and they're too scared to go to sleep, and they're very sick, and they can't no money to get medication. My question is, how would you feel, guys, if it was you? I mean, it's very hard.
Yeah, it is. I'd accept that, and it's very difficult, and it's very unfortunate. We don't endorse that, but this is something that we'll continue to work with the state government on. It is a state government matter and a federal government matter. We'll continue to work with them and whatever solutions that they can, and we'll support them wherever possible. Right. That's
okay.
3 questions.
You.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act of 1993, Council acts as a planning authority in regard to items included in Agenda 9 Planning Authority. So the first item up is 9.1, We do have speakers for 9.1. First one here is Jocelyn Ives, I think. Ives?
Rosalind Hart.
Oh, Rosalind. That's an R. Sorry, my apologies.
You should know me by now. Good afternoon, everyone.
Just a reminder, you have 2 minutes and we'll give a note, a bell will ring. Can you do that now to let people know?
I'm very aware, I've done it before.
I want that for everybody else because there's a few speakers today.
Thank you. I respectfully acknowledge the Palawa people whose lands we meet on today, land that was never ceded. Honouring the original tribes of La Truita, who are no longer here because of the brutal invasion, and the Tasmanian Aboriginal community of today is very important. Was the Aboriginal community consulted or included for this GA development proposal from its onset? Councillors should first and foremost represent concerns raised by the community, but there is no encouragement to venture outside the recommendations from the planning officers in voting against this DA. Comments made in the representation summary by officers repeatedly state, not outside the planning laws. Such a transformative project as this one was approved initially without community consultation for the allowable limits of this type, height and siting of city developments, now and into the future that the community expects. The Mayor, representing Council, through the comments he has made that were published in the media, showed bias in support of the development. The necessary neutrality of Council is questionable, and this DA is presented with the uncertainty of proper process being in place. When such a transformation of Launceston's built heritage is allowed to pass so easily without direct consultation with the Launceston community, there is a problem with the system. The silos were already there, and the Myer and Telstra buildings are recognised as inappropriate. Launceston's built heritage is incredibly valuable and can too easily be compromised without proper planning to protect its integrity. Visual distraction when within the gorge will occur from the iconic and scenic Gorge Walk because of the location of the project. This should set off alarm bells when visitors' comments show that they come here to experience the innate beauty of the natural aspects of the gorge.
Yeah, thank you. Your time is up. Thank you.
This development.
Next speaker, please, which will be Linda Collier.
Good afternoon, Mayor and councillors. The proposed hotel has and will continue to divide the community, as indicated in this letter to the editor from Steve Saunders, published in the Examiner on the 14th of September. I see the Gorge Hotel development has raised its ugly head, a development killed off once, only to be resurrected by the council, moving the goalposts and granting a special area plan to the developer. What better way to demoralise and deter residents from fighting an appropriate development than to change the rules when they win a planning challenge? The 40-metre high hotel is more than 2.5 times the height of the Launceston College. Go and see for yourself how high that really is. It represents a tall and wide barrier between the city and the Kanamaluku-Tamar River. This development will block views from north to south and south to north. A comparable example is the Lows-Calhoun Express in Sydney, which divides the city from the harbour at Circular Quay. It's what we can look forward to with this development. The proposed Gorge Hotel would alienate the public from its river. This proposed hotel does not and never ever will have a social licence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anne Leighton-Bennett, and Anne will be speaking first for herself, I understand, and then for the Hands Off the Gorge, so she'll get 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Cataract Gorge has a deeply emotional and spiritual connection for residents and visitors. It's imperative that all development proposals that sit in the vicinity of the gorge are given particular consideration and scrutiny. As its steward, the Council has a responsibility to ensure the gorge is managed and protected with due regard and respect for everyone who cares for and about it. Approval criteria must be flexible enough to take into consideration its ambient qualities. These may not have a measurable dollar value attached to them, but they shouldn't be dismissed as unimportant. Although not easily identified on a balance sheet, they are priceless and must never be devalued or lost through inappropriate or insensitive intrusions, such as a hotel that will dominate and disturb the gorgeous, serene and tranquil environment. The revised DA has done little to address key concerns involving significant size and scale. This hotel is still, quite simply, too big. It will dominate, dwarf and overshadow everything in proximity and will damage Launceston's justified reputation for architectural elegance. It will also seriously impact our city's residents, hence the strongly divided public opinion. The DA may have been tweaked, but with council elections due in a matter of weeks, it's concerning and disappointing this controversial project is being hurried through in the final weeks of the current term. Flexible approval criteria needs to extend beyond the limitations of existing planning legislation. I therefore urge Council to defer its decision and wait until the new Council is elected. Residents and ratepayers deserve a public forum and an opportunity to better understand the impact of a development that so thoroughly divided public opinion. I urge Council to reject this controversial hotel application outright, or to at least defer any decision until the incoming Council is elected. And on behalf of Hands Off Our Gorge Community Group, we absolutely refute and reject claims that the proposed Gorge Hotel will be a dramatic architectural form inspired by the natural beauty of the Cataract Gorge, its setting, its visual beauty, its ruggedness, and its geological and structural formations. Community group Hands Off Our Gorge stands up for these unique aspects of the Cataract Gorge and does not believe a concrete and glass 39-metre hotel tower will either reflect or complement the natural beauty of our gorge at all. We consider the scale, height, and proximity of this hotel will have an extremely negative impact on the gorge and on the daily experience of the Launceston community who love and value its natural beauty and tranquility. And we again urge the Council to reject this development application as being completely inappropriate. We again stress the proposed hotel tower at 39 metres tall is simply far too high. Although the Council's recently approved SAP for the area has dismissed the performance criteria that required the hotel to be compatible with its surroundings, it will still be a highly offensive and intrusive building in the area. Its size will impact on views of the heritage houses of West Launceston, loom over the route to the gorge, and indeed impact on views in every direction of the city. The hotel represents a massive and unwelcome change to Launceston's widely admired built heritage characteristic. The hotel's height will be all too visible from inside the gorge, dominating and intruding on the view from the Cataract Walk towards Kingsbridge. It will also dominate vistas from a key viewing point outside the gorge. Hands Off Our Gorge urge the Council to reject the application for this highly controversial and inappropriate hotel proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie Kai.
Susie Kai, 22 Margaret Street. I appreciate once again having the opportunity to address Council, although I regret the circumstances that have brought us here. I'm going to try to explain why we believe, despite the Planning Office's recommendation, that this development remains non-compliant with the planning scheme, while my husband's talk focuses on how it will personally affect us. We support the submission by Irene Inc. Planning and Urban Design, and we still don't believe it has been effectively addressed in the applicant's response or planning report. The recommendation of Tarkiri report are not sufficient to meet the performance criteria in relation to noise in 15.3.4. The report does not specify what action should be taken if noise is detected by the monitoring system above the specified levels, and this is not addressed in the conditions either. Obviously, it would be impractical to close the deck at short notice during the advertised hours. We also do not accept that the SAP applies to this proposal, despite the planning officer's assessment that it does. It is open to council to determine whether the other uses proposed by the applicants are subservient to the visitors' accommodation use. As such, the applicant has a responsibility to provide evidence that the other users are subservient, and the council has a responsibility to determine whether they are. Sufficient evidence has not been provided, therefore the SAP does not apply. We already know from the tribunal's decision on the previous application that the height of the building is not compatible with the streetscape and character, and therefore does not comply with the performance criteria in 15.4.1. For these reasons, the application does not comply with the planning scheme and should be rejected. Councillors, it is not too late to do the right thing. We shouldn't have to go through appeal after appeal to prove this development is non-compliant.
Thank you. Wee Kai?
I'll speak for him.
Yep, that's fine. You've got 2 minutes. Yep.
Wee Kai, 22 Margaret Street. The development proposed by the JAC Group poses an imminent threat to our livelihood and our way of life. The overshadowing will cause more damp and mould in our house, worsening health issues for 2 of our 3 children who have asthma. It will render the $35,000 solar system and battery backup we've installed almost useless, increasing electricity costs for our home and business, and will overshadow our only recreational open space. Because of my elderly father's health conditions, he cannot just walk to the park, and is essential he has access to sunlight at home. If this 40-metre hotel goes up, our whole neighbourhood would be turned into a breeding ground for mould. People are not mushrooms. We should not be expected to live like one. These issues are unrelated to the reasons we believe this application fails to comply with the planning scheme, but I raise them anyway to help councillors understand the serious impact this decision could have on us. We urge councillors to do their duty according to the law to assess this application on its planning merits. Previous debates on this proposed development have reviewed that some councillors have difficulty understanding their duty when council sits as a planning authority. For example, some councillors argue for the previous application based on economic benefits, which are not mentioned in the planning scheme. Councillors also argue that their support for the planning scheme amendment was an extension of their support for the previous application, even though planning legislation requires them to be assessed against completely different criteria. And some argued in favour of both the previous DA and planning scheme amendment based on public support for the project, which is not part of the statutory criteria for either. If during the debate on this application, councillors advance these same arguments instead of the relevant planning criteria, they will be failing in their statutory duty. This will not be fair to us or any of the residents and ratepayers they represent. My father's condition, medical condition, is called progressive supranuclear palsy. It's similar to Parkinson's disease. Show your heart and have some empathy. Thank you.
Lily Kai?
Lily Kai, 22 Margaret Street. I'm against the hotel for the following concerns. Margaret Street used to be part of the Tamar River, therefore the foundations under it are silt. The silt will probably not support the 40-metre stories weight, and I would like to ask what are the proposed reparations in the unfortunate case of accidents causing damage to surrounding properties. I'm also concerned about the traffic congestion along Patterson Street and Margaret Street. How will that be affected during and after the construction? Will commuters from Trevellyn be expected to find an alternative route during the construction phase? And will they also be expected to compete with the future patrons for parking as well as, will they be expected to compete with the future patrons for parking as well as, There will also be increased noise and light pollution. What will be done to ensure that it is minimised, especially during late night hours? Will the pre-existing water and sewage treatment plant on Patterson Street be able to manage the waste of the proposed patrons efficiently? And also, during bad weather, the plant often emits a foul odour. Is that something that will be tolerated by future patrons? Along with that, the education of LC students will be impacted not only by the construction of the hotel, but also by future patrons. The construction will impede teaching and will be a permanent and constant distraction to students. The vibrations may also pose an increased risk to some of the students, especially the ones working in the chemistry labs with certain dangerous chemicals. I would like these issues to be considered when you consider the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen Tate.
Mr Mayor and councillors, you've heard quite a few already of the people who are concerned, and I'd like to say that rather than being the noisy minority, I hope you're starting to see that we are doctors, we are lawyers, we are clergymen, we are tradesmen, we are builders, we are family people, and so on. So as you all know, well, we know it's going to bring enormous change. It's very clear that special provisions that the council has accepted were for this project on a unique site for a ubiquitous hotel rather than a landmark cultural or aesthetic development. The intrusion is massive, and it's a massive impost on the character of Launceston and on the town citizens. Have shown in their great efforts to be still contesting and still trying to get you to understand what this site means to us. I think it is incumbent as your duty to uphold the good name of the city, and that the council will provide a fair and proper hearing prior to a decision of such magnitude and the cause of such consternation for today and into the future. In the fine spirit of conflict resolution in a troubled world, I bring your attention to the process of Makarrata, given to us as an open-hearted invitation to come together under the southern sky for truth-telling and healing resolutions of conflict that profoundly affect us all. I am proposing that the next best thing for a civilised outcome here is to provide a social licence, and to provide a social licence is a citizens' assembly, and I've circulated that with you. It is a sophisticated modern approach. I think we're stuck in, when you put your planning hats on, you have lost the sense. Okay, so the proposition for you is before you.
Yeah, thank you. Your time is up. Thank you. Helen?
Yep,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Collier.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen. It's still Jim Collier of 39 Beach Road, Laguna, and it's a statement opposing development application 0390. There's obviously considerable opposition in the community to this project, but just in case you missed it, I would like to read out the following letter to the editor published in the Examiner on 16th of September. Another compulsory vote coming up, this time for the City Council. Hopefully we end up with some fresh, new, enthusiastic faces who are there for the good of everyone in the city, and not those who are willing to obey stakeholders who demand that they change their own planning rules to facilitate the building of certain hotels. If the Tasmanian Planning Commission knock projects back because they don't comply with state laws, then councillors shouldn't bend over backwards to amend their own laws. Let's hope in October we throw out the old and elect the new. That was written by Glenys Slurink of Launceston. Obviously, as I said, there's considerable disquiet about this hotel, and I would like to remind you that in 2019, the Resource Management and Planning Appeal Tribunal clearly and unequivocally stated in handing down their decision in respect of appeal number 58/19P regarding the proposed Gorge Hotel. For the reasons set out above, in respect to the failure of the proposed development to satisfy the criteria in P3 brackets B, bracket C and D. The building height is not compatible with the streetscape and the character of the surrounding area. Thus, the second ground of appeal is made out. Could I also just remind you, progress with prudence. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Victoria Wilkinson.
Good afternoon, thank you. Look, I'm really disappointed in the way that this council has gone about this, bringing the process of a hotel and extra height to Launceston. But I'm here to just focus on one aspect at the moment. I mean, it's been a long and sorry course of events, but what I want to look at today is I think this SAP and its sapling DA is a stealth bomber of a transition plan. And I'm going to quote from a council agenda when this was being considered. The SAP has been constructed to remove the onus of the proposed development to be complementary. And a little further along, as well as commencing a transition arrangement to the Margaret Street corridor. And I remember hearing the words kickstart in respect of the Margaret Street corridor. When were you going to talk about the Margaret Street precinct and what's in store? Many people in Launceston hardly know there's a new planning scheme, let alone this spawn of a SAP. And when it grows and spreads down Margaret Street, well, you have to keep saying that it's a good thing. It's like the Emperor's new clothes. Now, it is a mixed-use zone, and that's meant to facilitate people living and working in that area. But who would want to establish a residence, put some energy in, and live there if it can just be overwhelmed like that? Back in 2019, Tim Walker put forward a motion for the council to do a special area precinct survey. And I'll quote from him, to facilitate suitable opportunities for buildings of increased height and scale within Launceston central areas. At the time, the council voted against it on the basis this would be happening in the future. So this is all we get. A stealth bomber of a transition plan and a fuzzy hotel. And I note that there's a number of councillors missing here today. And I'm going to quote from a councillor here. You need to take a good hard look at yourselves.
Your time is up. Mark Baker.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. My name's Mark Baker. I'm Executive Director of Northern Cities with Department of State Growth. And I speak in support of the Gorge Hotel for a number of reasons. Firstly, in relation to demand and need for the type of development. Despite the COVID crisis, this premium market is growing in Tasmania, as is the average spend. There is a 5-star hotel cohort that only travels to such accommodation, and Launceston is missing out on that market. The average $221 room rate in the south versus the average $170 room rate in the north clearly shows the south has more offerings within this premium market and yet has an overall higher occupancy rate than the north. While the north has shown a bigger percentage increase in visitors over the south, the north fails to convert those into the same increase in nights, suggesting the need for accommodation that fits with visitors looking for this premium offering. Further, Launceston is lacking conference facilities, and this would help drive that lucrative market. In regards to the economic impact, 200 direct and indirect jobs and the multiplier effect on economic contribution will be substantial. We're fortunate that the initial 2019 approval has been made possible and that we haven't missed this opportunity for Launceston. It might have been easy to take that capital and put it elsewhere, particularly when we see the rising costs of construction and finance. It's also fortunate that international operators are still looking for a 5-star hotel in Launceston. In the current environment, the message this developer is sending by investing in Launceston is substantial. Now, while I support people's rights to voice their concerns, some of the objections are spurious and irrelevant and rightly rejected by the council officer's report. In regards to the SAP and height, the SAP permits the height, but at any rate, it is a low area of the city and the building is lower than those already in Launceston, and the tower is set back in the site to reduce bulk. I recognise the concerns about the SAP, but as noted, that followed due process, including public advertisement and public hearings. There's also talk of character of the area. I heard a lot about that, but I'd argue there is no definable character due to the variety of buildings, businesses and infrastructure in the vicinity.
Thank you. Your time
Thanks,
is
Mayor.
up as
Thank you,
well, Mark.
councillors.
Thank you. Carolyn Gutteridge.
Hi, good afternoon. I also note we don't have all councillors present today, and also note that 5 of you are not recontesting. I hope you've read my submission, but just to start with, I remind you of your message on your machine. Launceston, an example of intact early architecture, depicting colonial and Victorian historical character dating to 1824, and it continues. Cynical me now expects that message to be rewritten to reflect the needs of developers rather than embracing the beautiful buildings that we've come to use to. Our visitors, my visitors, don't ask me to go around to look at modern buildings in Launceston. And I proudly show them this building, Customs, all the beautiful buildings. No one's interested in a glass concrete building. It is a heritage precinct. Stillwater dates back to 1830s. Penny Royal, which was relocated, the buildings date back to 1830s. Church of the Apostles, 1866. We have retained, and we've done good work in retaining heritage until now. We should take an example from the city of Nelson in New Zealand, which is also on an earthquake belt, and their Art Deco buildings are a pure tourist attraction. They have not gone the way of high-rise, obviously. It should be a benchmark for our councillors and developers. We have all spoken around here about the proposal, and apart from Mr. Baker in favour, we are all appalled that the planning requirements were altered to fit in with the developer. There is no way that the council can explain itself out of that change. I will just focus on traffic, as I stated in my submission. It is a main problem. It takes me, in peak hour traffic, takes me 10 minutes to go from the corner to 44 Margaret Street, which is Church of the Apostles.
Your time is up as well. Thank you. Steve Saunders.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councillors. I was going to propose a deferment of the decision on the Gorge Hotel, given the to help gain the social licence that might be given by a second council. But, Mayor, as you've adequately explained, that a deferment is not possible under the current situation. If a decision must be made, then I argue against approving this decision, in that although the SAP is an approved planning process, it has been a betrayal of the citizens of Launceston and wasted their time and energy and finances. The council really does need to find ways to engage more with residents so that we achieve outcomes that are more appropriate to both. Was there even a suggestion that development might have been more height appropriate and yet still provide the same amenity? And where is the public amenity provided by this hotel? It seems to me that it's a purely commercial development with no benefit to the local residents, quite the opposite in fact. There's a link that I'm going to send to all the councillors which shows that development in civics and democracy around the world involve more citizen participation. Australia participated in this OECD report in 2020 and it provides for greater input before the planning process. I take your point that you cannot interfere with the planning process by introducing citizen assemblies, but the point is that they should be involved earlier with this type of activity during the development plans themselves. And so I encourage the council for these major projects to try and look at this option, which I don't think would involve any great cost to the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chloe Lynn.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I feel like I have addressed you at length about this project over the last few years. It has been a journey and it will be great to see it to come to fruition today. The proposal does not differ at all from the one previously approved by such councils around the table as several years ago now. The key difference is today, when you are voting, you have confidence that the height is permitted, which, as you know, is a result of a decision to amend the planning scheme by council, but importantly was ratified by the Tasmanian Planning Commission as having a sound strategic basis. The Planning Officer's report has addressed the issues raised by the representatives, and it is clear there's nothing of substance under the current planning scheme provisions that warrants a deviation from the planner's recommendation of approval of this project. The JAC Group has obtained its own legal advice around the issue of ancillary uses, and it is clear that Council is able to move forward and approve the application as it stands today. Restaurants, bars, gyms, they're all clearly ancillary uses to a hotel, and in many hotels around the state, around the country, around the world, you see them as part of the hotel and are clearly subservient to the main use of visitor accommodation. Regardless of that, except for the bar at the rooftop, which is only accessible through the hotel lift shaft, all the other uses are under the 12-metre permitted height limit outside of the SAP in any case. Another issue that's been raised is the impact to the gorge. Whilst there are provisions in the planning scheme that protect the gorge, they do not apply to this site, so it isn't a valid consideration under the planning scheme. The final point I'd like to make is around noise and the queries about the noise report that was provided. Noise was actually a ground that was tested under the previous tribunal decision and wasn't made out, and the appellants didn't even contest the evidence provided by the JAC expert on that matter.
Yep,
Thank you.
Your time is up. Joe Cromie.
My name is Joe Cromie from Launceston. I come here 70 years back. All my time looking what the best for Launceston and Tasmania. Roads are looking for employment and tourism. We needed tourism and employment for good Launceston of Tasmania. I also you will be for that separate police support here. I like police support my dream of hotel. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
No, you said it very well, Joe.
Okay.
Everyone understood.
Thank you. Dean Cocker.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. Councillors voted on this application, not this application, but for this project back in 2019. It approved the DA. In 2021, it approved a specific area plan that made the height permitted, and the Tasmanian Planning Commission approved that height, which made not just the height permitted, but also there are ancillary uses that were listed in that specific area plan that exactly cover the ancillary uses that are provided in this application. There were issues raised by some of the other speakers about overshadowing. Well, the tribunal looked at that and it said that the neighbour would retain more sunlight than the standard in a general residential area, yet they live in the middle of the city. That is not a valid planning ground to refuse this application, and the tribunal said so. What we hope is that council will not be distracted by these issues that are not relevant to this planning application. We need a 5-star hotel. We need the 280 to 300 jobs, actually, that were provided as an estimate of what this project would generate. And when it comes to the ancillary uses, bars, restaurants, function areas, gyms, even bottle shops, these are all things that we all know are ancillary to almost every single major hotel around the country and around the world. You will see them. So, to question whether or not they're ancillary is, ridiculous, really. And separate from that, all of those specific uses are listed within the specific area plan itself. So I don't think council should have any concerns about whether or not it's ancillary. But even if it did, those uses occur in the building within the 12-metre permitted height.
Yep, thank you. Your time is up. Robin Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. I've listened.
A bit closer to the mic. Thank
Sorry.
you.
I've listened carefully, and I've sort of watched this proposal for a few years now. And when I say a few years, I could take you back about 50 years to a hotel such as this down at next to where I used to live at 145 Patterson Street. And there was a hotel proposed to be even taller than this. And it was going to have what was then advertised as the fastest lifts in the world. And we actually went to Germany, Sydney, and other cities to go and have a look at this. And in those days, lifts weren't that fast. So it's going to be its feature. Hopefully today, if it gets proposed, it'll be the cuisine or the quality of the rooms. That never happened, of course. I've listened to Jim and Victoria and Lionel, and I appreciate their time and their input to it. But I have to support this proposal now, and I hope you would too. And I work in a cafe, and I listen to people, and I talk to. It's practically all you do in a cafe. And it is a tourist district. It needs a 5-star hotel. Launceston hasn't really got one. It's lucky to have a 4-star. It depends who's doing the star rating system. There's that many different versions of the star. We have Rio Tico restaurant, the Cataract on Patterson, Stillwater, a Leader restaurant, Brady's, Kingsbridge. It is a precinct. There are buildings there, and I did hear someone speak earlier and said it'll never have a social license. Now that concerned me because I can remember when the windmill was built, and in my lifetime I've heard the Ritchie's Mill objection to that, and I think it just might have a social license, and I would put it to you that I think it's possible, and I've looked at the design, and the 3 that were proposed, and the best was chosen, and I believe it probably was about the best, although the others weren't that bad. So I would support this. I'd ask you, councillors, to support this, and it warms the cockles of my heart to think that potentially this hotel could be built on a 5-star. If it truly is a 5-star, it again, listening to the word dreams that I heard the proponent talk about, it was a dream for this to be built long ago.
Thank you very much. Your time is up as well. Any other speakers? It's all the names that I have.
Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor.
Just state your name and address. Thank you.
John Perry, Coordinator General. I'd just like to speak in support of the proposal, which I think will be an outstanding addition for Launceston and for Northern Tasmania. I'd endorse the comments made by other speakers in support of the project, and I won't, in the interest of time, I won't repeat those. But I will endorse also the need for a 5-star hotel. If you look at the increase in room numbers that we've seen recently, in Hobart we've seen 244 5-star rooms added in the last couple of years, and about 940 odd rooms in the 4-star and above market. We've seen an increase in that market demand and an increase in the focus on increasing yield in Tasmania, but Launceston is missing out. And what we have seen in recent statistics, which Mark referred to, is that there's been an increase in the number of visitors that have come to Launceston, but a reduction in the actual visitor nights that have been stayed. Attracting an international hotel brand into Launceston will attract new visitors who wouldn't come here otherwise, and we've had research that shows that as many as 16 to 20% of their visitor numbers will be new visitors as a result of their loyalty and distribution scheme. I think the other piece that we wanted to also touch on is that in terms of a share and making sure that Launceston gets the benefit of the increase in tourism numbers, tourism represents a higher proportion of the economy in Tasmania than any other state. And at the moment, we attract in the north of the state about 10% of the conference numbers, and yet we have about 40 to 45% of the visitor nights. And similarly, we're seeing that drop off in relation to the premium area. So this will make a significant increase, not only for their own economic impact, but for the whole tourism industry generally. And I commend the proposal to you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No? Thank you. So we have item before us, and a reminder, we sit as a planning authority. Item number 9.1, moved Councillor McKenzie. Is there a seconder? Councillor Spencer. Councillor McKenzie, wish to speak to it?
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you everybody for your contribution. I could too stand here and wax lyrical about the economic benefits that this proposal could make, but as Ms Kai made comment, we're here as a planning scheme today and make decisions under the planning scheme. As we've already heard said, on the 13th of the 6th, 2019, a council decision was made to approve a previous development application on this site for a hotel of a similar nature to the one we're looking at today. On the 7th of the 11th, 2019, REMPAT decision came out and refused the approval on the basis of height. Subsequent to that, a legal process was gone through in a proper process where a SAP was put forward to this council back in 2021, which went through its due public process, then came back to this council and approved and went to the Tasmanian Planning Commission. Tasmanian Planning Commission held hearings in relation to the matter and then approved the SAP, for which we are here to talk about today. Also, the DA, which has emanated from that SAP. People have talked about, we've been through this process and we've been taken to task and we've been sent to tribunals and we've won, but they seem to forget the fact that everybody should have a fair opportunity to make representations, including the developer. He wasn't happy with it. We as a council, our council officers actually promoted it as part of a DA in 2019 on the basis of the planning scheme. Subsequent to that, we actually approved another hotel called the Fragrance Group, and the reference sites in relation to height were completely different. And if that would have been used against the Gorge Hotel, may well have been approved at that stage on that basis. So the tribunals are not want without getting things wrong either. So a proper process has gone through by the developer in the first instance, approved. Everybody has their right to appeal it, which was done. A decision was made. The developer looked at it again and said, we think this is still appropriate, put forward a SAP to us for us to look at. We put it out to public process. We received representations. We reviewed it. We passed it again, sent it to the Planning Tribunal, who then heard hearings. So I'm just repeating myself, but it's important because this is the process that we go through. So don't say that nobody had a chance to speak. There's been plenty of opportunity to speak in relation to this matter. I stand here and I've tried to go through all of the issues again because we come with an open mind in relation to this matter. And I could say, I've decided that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I don't need to change my mind on it. I've gone through and I've tried to relate back to the representations that were made. I've listened and read the officers' reports in regards to all the issues. The overshadowing and amenity issue was dealt with at the tribunal and hasn't been raised greatly in this one. If I have any sympathy, the people are the Kais who live next door in relation to the matter. It will certainly be imposing. But it is a vacant block of land, a large part of that, and therefore things will get built, and it isn't a commercial or a mixed zone, so therefore we can't control that. And as our officer said today, they could build a 15-metre wall there without building this building and make it a lot worse than what it is today with regards to the development application. There's been issues regarding seismic amounts and things like that matters. That was dealt with at the tribunal as well, and the building expert said that can be dealt with as part of the building code, so nothing to deal with in relation to it. Traffic management's been raised on a number of occasions in relation to the matter. Again, it's been through a traffic report and it's been approved by the people who know something about traffic, who I don't. And then there's the issue about subservient issues. I don't know any hotel in the world that I've been to that doesn't have a gym, there's probably one or two, but in the main, the hotels that I go to and the five-star nature of this one have gyms, restaurants, shops, all sorts of different things. So in my doubt, there is absolutely no doubt that these are subservient to a hotel complex of the nature that's being put forward to us today. I could go on and on. I'm not going to, because a lot of these arguments have been discussed and dealt with in previous discussions. I think the officers in their report in dealing with the issues that have been raised by representatives have dealt with them extremely well and clearly, and I'm here to support the proposal today.
Thank you. Councillor Walker has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have two questions. First of all, our last speaker in regards to representations was John Perry, the Coordinator General for the state. As a public servant, I'm just asking the CEO, is it appropriate that a public servant comes to make representation today on this planning matter that this council is deciding?
CEO, would you...
Thanks, Mr Mayor. He didn't make a representation, he spoke to the meeting, so it's a representation, obviously a statutory document which wasn't part of so it wasn't actually a representation, so people are entitled to to present and make their views known to the council, so as long as they follow the instructions which the Mayor outlined. So,
could I ask people to be quiet out there? Otherwise, I'll ask you to leave. Thank you.
Second question.
This is not Parliament.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I ask the CEO the appropriateness of councillors, and Councillor Mackenzie just did do this, referring to the tribunal decision as a mistake?
CEO?
I'm not sure what he wants.
I didn't hear that, actually. That you made a
Just to clarify, Councillor Mackenzie referred to the tribunal's decision as being found as subsequently a mistake.
Do you wish to comment?
It certainly wasn't intended to be said that way.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dawkins has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of the speakers today touched on potential damage to other buildings in the vicinity. Can somebody please speak about a dilapidation report or some other way that people can get some comfort about knowing that the state their property's in now should be the state that it would be in at the completion of this project?
Thank you. Richard? Or...
We don't routinely require dilapidation reports. The obligation on the developer when constructing the building is not to damage, and there is legislation around those things in the Building Act and notification and other measures to deal with that in the Building Act. So it's not our practice to routinely require them at the planning stage.
Thank you. Any further? No? Councillor Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. Two questions. We've heard a number of speakers, and indeed those that provided written representation, refer to concern regarding the ancillary uses and the subsequent to that, the visitor accommodation class specifically. I note we've had significant legal advice, 2 lots of legal advice. Could we have some certainty with regard to those concerns that have been raised today concerning the ancillary use associated with the DA?
Richard.
Well, it's the strong view of the officers that, based on the legal advice and the information that we have, that the development, the uses, supporting uses for the visitor accommodation should be cast as subservient under the SAP. When that issue was raised with us, we sought our own legal advice and we sought the opinion of the applicant, and we got 2 legal opinions which essentially supported that view. Ultimately, those things are a judgment call, but we firmly believe that the evidence and the legal opinion is in favour of them being classified as subservient, and that's why we've recommended the way we have to today.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks so much. The second question concerns that of the sewerage system. Again, a couple of representations and indeed speakers today referenced the inability of the network to deal with the infrastructure required. I note the inclusion of attachments from TasWater. Could you just summarise that for the benefit of us?
In the combined district, the management of sewerage from the development is a matter for TasWater, and TasWater have indicated to us and provided an approval to accept the sewer discharge, and that's all we need to move forward on that point.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer has a question.
Just wondering about the noise of the bar on top of the building. Will that be monitored or controlled by times?
There's two conditions that relate to noise, conditions 17 and 18. The first one endorses the Takari noise assessment and its recommendations, and that actually prior to any use commencing a further report be submitted by a suitably qualified person, being a noise engineer, that those recommendations have been adhered to. Condition 18 is a noise management protocol condition. So if I'll just read that. Prior to the commencement of operation, a noise management protocol is to be prepared by an acoustic engineer to manage noise from the rooftop restaurant, function centre and sky bar and lounge to be developed. A copy of this noise management protocol is to be provided to Council's Manager Health and Compliance. So that condition would be seeking that protocol if there are noise concerns or how to deal with noise concerns.
Now, just a second question, if I can. The solar panels, 10 kilowatts of solar panels, do we know how much energy they're going to lose in this building affecting those solar panels?
Well, look, I guess when we're looking at overshadowing, it's not a consideration because we're looking at the height which is within the SAP. So your overshadowing is not determined through this assessment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Just following on from the Deputy Mayor's questions about ancillary or subservient uses for the property, I'd just like to ask our planning officers, what would the definition of subservient be? For example, a gym, a restaurant, retail shops, which has also been suggested use. Now, are we saying by subservient that we mean that those are there for the primary service of the people staying in the hotel? I.e., if there was no one staying in the hotel, would someone still be using those particular services, perhaps a gym, perhaps a retail shop, perhaps still going to a restaurant? In other words, what do we mean by subservient?
Thank you. Richard? There. Richard.
In this context, a subservient use would be a use that works in conjunction with and supports the primary use of the site and functions to complement and provide for a range of services that might be expected with a dominant use, like a hotel. So a hotel gym would be reasonable to be, and a hotel bar and a restaurant for people to have breakfast in. Those are things that are reasonably required for a hotel to function. And so we believe that they would fall under that category. It wouldn't preclude, importantly, it wouldn't preclude people from outside of the hotel coming in and eating breakfast on Mother's Day. But the purpose of this is to function as part of an integrated hotel business.
Thank you. Another question?
Yeah, bearing in mind, thank you, Chair, that there would be retail spaces involved in this. That would mean that this is ostensibly a public space that people from the outside will continually use, regardless of whether anyone is staying in the hotel.
Richard? Yeah.
I mean, if there's a souvenir store in the foyer, I'm presuming that would be ancillary. If they opened a branch of Coles in the car park, it wouldn't be. So it is a matter of fact and degree.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer, wish to speak as a seconder?
Thanks, Mayor. One big question we've got here. Does this comply with the planning scheme? Officers say yes, so we're probably going to have to vote for it. We need development in the city for jobs. University's got 2 more years to run. Where's the next big project? There's only motels on the cards. This is our problem. Tradies work hard. They buy new cars, they buy boats. They spend money in the city. This is what we need. All this makes a good economy and jobs. I'm sorry, that's what it does. One thing that upsets me, we had Paul Davis' report where he recommended to have buildings at 24 metres. But you could go bigger. This may be not the right location for it, but there's no land left to build a suitable building in the middle of Launceston. 5-star motel. We haven't got one. We need a 5-star motel in this city. Definitely needed 5-star motel. It will bring a lot of tourism, and the height will have to probably be there to make it viable for the people that want to rent it or buy it. You're going to have 300 rooms or whatever to make it viable, and that's why you need the height. I don't really like the height, but where else is the land we could do this on? Views are not considered, but all the people that lose the views in West Launceston, I feel sorry for them. But views are not counted. Tribunals assessed all this and said it all meets the criteria, so I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Question, Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mayor. I do have quite a few questions. The traffic study that accompanies this, was that the same traffic study that was done for the initial development application, or has that been augmented since then?
Yeah. Oh, Richard? They're just going to check that out, so...
It's the same report as the original application.
And what year was that?
2019.
Thank you. There's various references, both from the developer and also from the council, regarding the Margaret Street corridor and the idea that somehow this specific area plan that this hotel is to be built in would relate to a broader precinct. But as a council, do we have any policy or structure around this precinct?
Richard?
When Council considered the Paul Davies report, the Paul Davies report concludes that of all the locations in the city that has the capacity to accept change, because obviously there's a lot of the city, a significant area of the city that is constrained by heritage buildings and other things, small lots and other things that will essentially prevent significant change over the future, that there are some areas of the city that have a greater capacity to change than others. So the Margaret Street corridor has been highlighted in a number of reports. So prior to the Paul Davies report, the Launceston Residential Strategy and the Launceston Industrial Strategy both mark the Margaret Street corridor as a transition area and specifically call it a transition to try and improve, to bring more intense development to that corridor, to bring the kind of things that might be beneficial to Launceston, like higher numbers of people, residential apartments, and to actually provide those things that a growing city needs. At the moment, the Margaret Street corridor is characterised by a relatively low urban quality, ground level car yards, and agency type developments. And so there has been, of those three reports are the ones that pick that out as a place to change. And then obviously when the SAP came through, those things were synthesised into the arguments supporting the SAP. So essentially, although we've had those policies on the books for quite some time, you actually need to make a change. You actually need some people to do something, and you need the support to do it. And at the end of the day, redeveloping inner urban sites for higher intensity, people-focused uses isn't easy. And so when something comes along that aligns with that objective, that's why they were the underpinning rationales behind the SAP. Because as a growing city, building intensity of development in a city residential, urban uses and bringing people into those spaces is seen to be a good thing. So does that answer your question?
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It answers my question that we don't have an existing policy regarding that. But now, if today this particular development application is approved, would it mean, for example, someone, let's say like Susie Kai, who owns the property next door, could now apply for a 41-metre development application on that site using the adjoining site as justification for the height for her development? Or would she still need a specific area plan?
Richard.
There has never been a height limit in Launceston. So you can apply for whatever height you want. There is no height limit. You have to make a case under the performance criteria that you are compatible with what's around you. Now, where you are in an area of low quality or low urban form, and you propose something that is more intense and more significant form, it is hard to be compatible because you have to be compatible with that form. And as we discussed with this site, the car parks, the college, it's not necessarily a form that we desire to be compatible with going forward. And that was another underpinning rationale for the SAP. Now, if a significant form is built here, it may well assist an argument that another form go next to it in the future. Those are a matter of that needs to be assessed on the facts of the development applications when they come in. But in simple forms, if you have taller buildings in the area, it is easier to be compatible with.
Thank you.
I think if I could, summarise the line of questioning, it is that we don't have a policy specific to...
Are you speaking now?
No, I'm not. I'm just adding to the questioning.
No, it's question time. So.
Yes, I'm adding to the question that we don't have a specific...
No, you're speaking now. Do you want to ask another question?
I'm predicating another question, thank you, Chair.
Well, please ask the question.
Based on the fact that we don't have an established plan for the area and that this will set a precedent for this particular area, are we likely to see a string of property owners along Margaret Street all asking for a specific area plan for their property, which will of course increase the value of their property markedly, but will also be based on the proviso that we approve this development application today?
Richard.
Well, I don't agree with the premise of the question. I mean, I've outlined three strategic documents that support the transition of the corridor. So I don't accept the premise that there is no statutory or supported council policy that doesn't anticipate a change in character in the Margaret Street corridor. If we get a number of individual proposals for buildings that require a SAP, then they would have to be considered on their merits at the time. We have the Paul Davies recommendation proposed a 24-metre discretion with a process to go higher. So under any circumstance, if you are over the permitted height limit or you would need a set of factors to determine whether that was appropriate. We can't not receive applications. So if people want to develop their lots and they want to put in applications, we will be required to consider them.
Thank you. Any further questions?
More questions, thank you. As I said, I do have a series of questions. Thank you, Chair. When it comes to the actual height of the building, there seems to be some conjecture and confusion. I do believe that the specific area plan relates to a height of, is it 41.5 metres? I've heard a height of 39 metres quoted. I've also heard a height of 43 metres quoted. Can we get a definitive understanding? Maybe it's just for me, maybe other people understand it, but because the site is on a slope and you can measure it from different points, of course, it's compared to things like the height of the Myer building. It's patently taller than the Myer building, but not from a sea level height perspective. So if you could clarify issues around that, that would be great. Thank you.
Richard, thank you.
I think it's important to remember that there are two methods of determining height. And so that may, if you're not familiar with looking at plans and things, you may well fall foul of that. There is what we call an Australian height datum height, an AHD height, which is an absolute height in space, not relevant, not relating to anything around it. So it is a height that can be recreatable by survey. That is now the SAP quotes those as the heights. Now, because the ground level is higher than zero AHD is notionally sea level, but because the site is higher than sea level, it starts from greater than zero AHD, so the height quoted in AHD, which is used as the SAP because it's recreatable, is in AHD. That's the 41.6 height limit. That's in the SAP. I have the SAP here. The heights are very clearly marked by colour coding and with an appropriate table. These are in AHD. Now, the second way of doing that is how the planning scheme might do it ordinarily, which is the height above natural ground level. So that's the highest points of the building above the ground immediately below it. So that varies. AHD doesn't vary, it's a plane in space. The maximum height can vary and it doesn't necessarily accord with the highest point of the building, depending on where the slope is and how the building relates to the topography underneath. So that is lower than 41.6 because, and that is where the 39 figure comes from. So the maximum height is 39. Does that make sense? It's quite a difficult concept to explain.
Any further questions, Councillor Walker?
Just one question for the CEO, if I may. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, and it has been mentioned by previous speakers, that we have all previously expressed our decisions on this previously, including myself. Some people might talk about bias and talk about issues that aren't relevant to the discussion and all that sort of thing. But I'm asking the CEO what advice he can give for people voting today, considering that they have previously expressed overt opinions regarding the need for five-star accommodation or the need for accommodation in Launceston, which are all things that are not directly relevant to the planning decision today. Thank you.
Thank you. CEO.
I haven't seen anything publicly expressed as part of this application. Clearly, the council's determined different applications in different fora around this. So, in terms of there's nothing that I've seen where a councillor has pre-stated their view in terms of this application that would cause any concern in terms of what's publicly stated positions today.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
So, I wonder what people have to do in this city to have an impact on the decisions that are made around this table. Of course, the developer entrepreneurs are within their right to bring forward ideas, to run the business as they see fit, as long as it fits the planning scheme. But of course, the public is entitled to express their concerns, their opinions, their love of their city. And in this case, what we've seen is a development application that hasn't changed one iota, not one bit. For all the effort that people have put in, the time, their energy and their money to fight for their right to have an opportunity to express their feelings, to express their opinion, they have received nothing up until this point. No concession. If this building had been designed as a moderate height, Have a look out the window. We've got a 4-storey building just across the way in Civic Square, the public library. Only 40% of the height of what is proposed on this site. That gives you some idea of what you're dealing with. And it won't be until, if this project is built, that people will go past and say, how did that ever happen? Just as they've said about the Telstra building, as they've said about the Myer building in the past in this city. So it all comes down to this. With all that community input and all that community angst coming to nothing. The plans haven't changed one scrap. I certainly voted against the first version of this because I felt it was outside the planning scheme, and the tribunal agreed that it was outside 15.4.1, as we all know. This should have been the end of it. This should have been the point where we could have had a community discussion about what is appropriate on this site. By all means, a 5-star hotel. I've never stayed in a five-star hotel, but by all means, we seem to need a 5-star hotel. Maybe a 5-star hotel that's not quite as tall as the one that was planned. That would be what would be appropriate after the tribunal made that decision. I voted against the specific area plan. I've spoken to our planning department today, trying to find out how this specific area plan is going to relate to the future of that area. And it's very difficult to say. If we've done this for one developer, then of course there will be other people who own land in this city who will want the same thing, if not more. That's what, if you support this today, you're opening the door to. It might be approved today, but I agree, it will never have social licence. From those people who have wanted to have their voices heard, but have not had any effect whatsoever on the outcome if this is passed today. Not one bit. And it will be always remembered that it's this council, these people, who will have supported this change in this city that we all profess to love, for different reasons perhaps, but one of the most important reasons is its livability, is this human scale that we find ourselves in. Not a city where you feel alienated by the buildings that surround you, but a city that provides the detail and provides the scale that makes you feel welcome and makes you feel a part of the city. And that is what people don't want to see progress today. So we should take the bias out of it, the idea that we need 5-star accommodation, the idea that perhaps we don't have enough hotel beds in Launceston. We need to take that out of it and look at what we're doing to our city. That's what we're looking at today. Now, I know that I voted against the amendment to the planning scheme, so it does make it difficult for me now to vote against this particular development. In many ways, it fits the planning scheme. There's some questions, some legal questions, that I still don't think have been adequately answered regarding that ancillary use.
Excuse me, Councillor Walker, your time's up. Would you like an extension?
If I can, thank you, Mayor.
Well, it's up to the meeting. Those agree with the extension? Yep, that's granted. Yeah, another 3 minutes, thank you. And again, I ask the people not to clap or cheer out there. Thank you.
Of course, there are some questions around this ancillary use. We're not to know who is going to use this building. Is this going to become, a largely public spaces? It probably will be. We're talking about a rooftop bar that, of course, people might want to visit. They're not going to pay to stay in a 5-star hotel just in order to use the rooftop bar. Of course not. So we have some major issues there to deal with that haven't been resolved today. Can we defer this decision today? No. This is a fait accompli. This has already been extended as far as it can. If we don't vote on it today, as much as I would like to have that opportunity for a genuine community discussion about the future of our city, We can't do that because this decision has to be made this week. Otherwise, it automatically becomes an approval, as the Mayor has pointed out. But the times are changing. People want more involvement in these decisions. People want more involvement about the future of their city. And people are standing up, and they will continue to do so. So my advice to any developer who would like to foist their plans upon their city is to have genuine consultation, to have genuine conversations. We could have already had a building on that site if that had occurred. But instead, we've gone through an elongated process, one where we've had to change the planning scheme to suit one particular developer, and we've created a precedent that I fear is very dangerous for this city. I won't be supporting this development application today. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks very much, Mr Mayor, and I too would like to thank all of the people who came along and gave their time up to hear the debate and speak today, but also to those who called me personally or emailed us as a group of councillors. Mr Mayor, obviously with some leniency from you perhaps, I know you are very, very strict in keeping councillors to making sure that in their remarks that they indeed, as many that have spoken today, ask us to focus on the planning scheme, because as you point out, when we sit as a planning authority, that's how we work, that's how we act, we follow the scheme. But in my remarks, that leniency that I just mentioned, I would like just to address a couple of the things that were raised today by some who spoke that have nothing to do with the planning scheme. And for me, Mr Mayor, I find a little bit of irony in that. Some who spoke today, some who wrote to us, some who called me personally, said time and again, you must follow the scheme. You must follow the scheme. We know that's the case. But then in their argument against this development, their arguments have nothing to do with the scheme. So I find that quite an interesting position. So I'm, as an elected official, have to follow the scheme, absolutely. It's part of our job when we sit as a planning authority, but others are saying you can't approve it for things that aren't to do with the scheme. I find that quite interesting. The couple of things, Mr Mayor, where I'm asking a little bit of leniency for, which I just want to highlight, and again, Mr Mayor, in this debate, because it's been an extended, elongated one over this issue for some time in various iterations, sometimes people don't like the answer. They don't like the answer, and they just keep asking the question because they don't like the answer. I think it may have been you, Mr Mayor, or the CEO, in response to the query that perhaps with councillors retiring or whatever, that this matter shouldn't be dealt with today. It's pointed out very clearly that whether or not re-election is sought for councillors, current councillors hold office until the date of the issue of certificate of election in respect of the elections that are in play at the moment. And I've got to say, I actually take offence that people feel that because maybe I'm retiring or others are not contesting, that we shouldn't have a say. I find that quite offensive because, Mr Mayor, every councillor who sits around this table doesn't know the outcome of what's going to happen in the voting. No one does. People haven't voted yet. So there could be councillors, Mr Mayor, who are sitting here today who have put their hand up and nominated who may not be re-elected. It's up to the people of Launceston to decide that. So I take a little bit of offence at that. And I guess the other thing too with that, Mr Mayor, is that some have said, oh, well, it should be deferred for the new council. Well, you know, people want it both ways. If we had a new council with a significant number of new councillors considering this in their first or second meeting, the critics would then say, how are these people supposed to deal with it? They're all new. So it's conflicted. One of the things, Mr Mayor, that causes me some concern, again, with a matter like this, there are many during my time around this table that have said to me, this council is for developers. They're all about developers. Other people write to me, Mr Mayor, and say, why don't you do something? Why are you so anti-development? So it depends which lens that you're looking through. So I'll leave that there. But
I was just going to say, if you could get onto the topic now.
absolutely.
That'd be great.
Well, that
Thank
was
you.
a little bit of leniency I asked you for. I guess when I look at the particular matters in front of us as part of this application, the matter in front of us, again, whether people like it or not, it is compliant with what needs to happen. So I guess my frustration in this particular issue, Mr Mayor, with the item that we're considering today is that within the item, and I always draw attention to the representations and how our planners respond to those concerns, is that by and large it can be summed up in a couple of different ways, Mr Mayor, and by and large the concerns per se that are raised aren't necessarily related to the planning scheme. So in terms of what's in front of us today that we're considering when we sit as a planning authority, the matters before us comply. So people mightn't like that they comply, and that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their view. But again, if you read through, and I'm sure...
Excuse me, your time is up to Councillor Sowell. Would you want an extension?
Thank you very much.
Moved by Councillor Dakin, seconded by Councillor Mackenzie. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Particularly when you look through the documents that are readily available online under the representation section point 5 that starts on page 20, there are many, many issues. Some we've heard from the speakers today that are raised, Mr Mayor. But when our planners respond, they make it clear where things have complied, or they make it clear where things are not part of the planning scheme consideration. So I guess, once again, Mr Mayor, people may not like... That's okay. That's what makes up a democracy. There are things we do that people like and things we do that they don't like. But as it's been pointed out many times, the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act is a state piece of legislation that all councils follow. So again, in reading the responses that are there in black and white, it spells out very, very clearly what our obligations are and why we do what we do. The Citizens' Assembly that was mentioned, it doesn't fit within the scope of the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act. And I think you yourself, Mr Mayor, may have highlighted that in a particular response to a question earlier today. So I'm going to leave it at that. But as I said, you know, I understand that people will, for such a significant development, have issue. It's not my case to be arguing whether we've got enough hotels or too many hotels or whatever, but in looking at what's there, Mr Mayor, in front of us in black and white, our officers have highlighted things that are considered as part of the scheme and things that have been raised that are not. So again, we need to deal with what's in the scheme. We need to deal with that. I understand the angst that this may have caused, but I also highlight that I, and I'm sure others have, had people contact me supporting this particular development. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I will be succinct in my comments given the number of contributions that have been received from my colleagues. I want to start by saying first and foremost that, like other councillors around the table, I take the dual role of councillor really seriously, and I clearly, as my colleagues do no doubt as well, understand wholeheartedly the role, the obligation of a member of a planning authority. I want to state really clearly and read into the meeting that the specific area plan has been considered and has been approved by the Tasmanian Planning Commission. And I also want to read into the meeting that applying for an amendment to a planning scheme is a legal and a common approach to planning. In terms of those people commenting on the governance and the process, the Council can only consider and assess an application against the criteria and against the scheme at the time of lodgement. And I certainly take on board the comments of Councillor Walker and others, but specifically I take on board the reference to the Paul Davies report and that of Height, and I note the comments that have been made with regard to associated use, ancillary use, subservient use. And I, despite some other speakers, I say that the legal advice received from two contrasting opinions is that it is deemed appropriate. And whilst I too haven't stayed in 5-star accommodation, I understand the need and associated use that comes with it. I want to say that with regard to the mixed use development and with regard to the height, I think it's set out quite clearly, regardless of which two height differentiations you take, the tower component being sat deep within the site to reduce the building's bulk, and importantly, the development's total height frontage being at a reduced height to that of the tower has been done with regard to consideration of the Paul Davies study and with regard to the significant nature of the site. I want to say in conclusion, Mayor, that many of the people who have spoken against today's DA are people that I regard as significant in terms of the work that they do in our city and the opinions that they hold. There are also people who speak for good governance and expect us to follow proper procedure in terms of making decisions, and it is for that reason today that I'll be supporting the DA as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you. I stand today to support this application. We've been here before, clearly, and I don't want to repeat the words that have been said by other councillors. I don't like the process. I guess that for a long time now we've known that there are two ways that this could have gone. The way that it has gone, testing it at REMPAT, testing it on the council table, and then testing the height and the overshadowing at REMPAT, or firstly applying for the specific area plan and then working through a process that way. That would have been my advised process. If anybody had asked me, that's what I would have recommended. I understand enough about planning now to know that that would have been a process that I think people would have felt more comfortable with. And I certainly would have felt more comfortable with it. But that's not my decision. My decision is to look at every application that comes before me and then make that determination. And my opinion has not changed. Whether that's bias or not, I am a human being. You know, I am connected to my brain, both every time I sit, whether it's in the planning authority or as an ordinary councillor, it's still me. I understand that. It is complex and it is difficult, but I still understand that I listen to the recommendation of our expert planners and I understand that they can interpret for me that law and then I'm able to make that decision myself, which I am today. I've also listened to people in my community. I listened specifically to a man named David James, who was the coordinator for the Hands Off the Kings Park group, when a hotel was floated for a site across the road some years ago. Now, he stopped me on the street and he said, I know how difficult this is for you. I know how hard it is for every councillor. I know there's very divided opinions on whether this hotel should go ahead because I was a part of that process all those years ago. And I'm standing in front of you and you can use my name and you can say, I support this development today because this is what we argued for. We argued for the developers to step back, to move across the road into a lower part of the community, into a lower part of the city and to build a hotel because a hotel is needed for this beautiful site. This is not the gorge. This doesn't change the gorge. This is well outside the gorge. It's beside one of our busiest streets in this area. It's, you know, it's above a wall. You know, the development, the add-on to the Launceston College, that's not a beautiful wall. There's nothing about that screams heritage to me. This is very clearly a mixed precinct. Now, do I like the specific design? Not that much. It doesn't suit me. I'm also not somebody who would ever go to a 5-star hotel. It's not my jam, but it does speak to these developers and they do own this property. So it's well within their right to make this decision, to find their designers and to go out and build this hotel. I live in Trevellyn. Will I love it when I drive past every day? Maybe not, but I also understand that this whole city is not for me. It's not for my style. It's not for my taste. I have to take on board what I understand from the planning scheme and what I've listened to, and I have to accept that this kind of development will happen in our city. I want an active nighttime economy, and I know these kinds of developments will add to the livability of this city for me and for people like me.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close?
Just briefly, I think it's all been said. Look, at the end of the day, a specific area plan was approved on the 4th of the 3rd, 22 by the Planning Commission. An application was received for a development application based on the specific area plan that's there. The assessment that's been made by the officers suggests that the DA fits the specific area plan and the planning scheme in general. As a consequence of that, today I think there is only one decision we can make, and that's to approve it.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? So that's one against. That's Councillor Walker. The rest are all for, and that is carried. Thank you. We've got some speakers for 9.2. James Graham. No, not here. James Graham there?
James Graham is here.
Oh, well done.
Effectively, all I wanted to do is...
Just your name and address for the record.
Right. It's James Graham, 17 Quarry Road, West Launceston. It was that point of the DA that came out, or that is out for 19. I'm basically speaking on behalf of 17 Quarry Road, being her of 120 years old plus. She's been looking down at the gorge and the swimming pool area for that period of time. So that consequently, when it comes to that decision making, I'd just like some further thoughts gone into that process, so that when inevitably the way that the curvature of the hill is, and the structure of the floor plates from 21 through 27 back through to 17, they're all on the same linear plane. The proposed plan for 19 Quarry Road is set above that height, so consequently there's many issues that could be brought up. One of them being the elephant in the room, that in the initial purchase stage was the discussion of the owner of that property to say, as I can see the swinging bridge from my kitchen sink, if I can see that, I don't care what you build. And it's always going to be a challenge to have that being brought up, because we know that...
Thank you. Your time is up, so if you could wind it up. Thank you. Is Karen Jenkins there, please?
Hi, my name's Karen. I live at 17 Quarry Road. I was lucky enough to buy this wonderful 120-year-old home, of which we have no fingernails left, scars on our knees. We are slowly doing this house up. The thing that I'd like to talk about is to come home to this view where I can see the swinging bridge, the trees, and the beautiful outlook makes me realise that I made the right decision to move to Launceston a few years ago. But right now, I understand that everybody has a right to build a home and a place to come home to. But what my question is that for just a little bit of moving back of a building, we all get to share. Surely we all have the right to share this view. Because quite honestly, the heartbreak to know that I'm going to be coming home to a wall and a floor level that is at my fence level, I'm heartbroken, and I just don't see how we couldn't share. That's what I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Someone happy to move 9.2 or move a motion? Oh, sorry. Yep, thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily and...
Just come a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily and I live in Russell Street in Invermay, and I am proposing to have a house built on 19 Quarry Road. I understand that there is a lot of conjecture about where the house sits on the land. I would just like to say that a lot of consideration was taken in where to place the home. We went to a lot of effort. The builder and the architect that we used built Frenchman's Cap. So we believe that in taking this time, we have considered how things move in the land. We have moved the house about in consultation with the neighbours back in December and have made several changes to the plans since then, making sure there's no eaves and making windows lower to the ground, and just a few other things to allow them to share the view with us so that they can still see the view. And we've made our upstairs living area smaller so we could move the house over so that our kitchen windows aren't overlooking each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? No? Someone happy to move? Councillor Mackenzie moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Spencer?
Thanks,
Councillor
Mayor.
Mackenzie, wish to speak? Yes.
Thanks, Mayor. I just anticipated you were going to invite me to speak. Look, these are always difficult, and I guess we get the hard planning decisions. The reality of it is when you have a vacant block next to a house, you can't control what's going to be built on it at some stage in the future if something is in fact going to be built on it. I certainly empathise with the view of the swinging bridge. I certainly wouldn't love that happening to my house. I've been doing this gig for about 11 years now, and I've had to deal with people's view being taken out by buildings beside them, but when they fit the planning scheme or they fit the performance criteria of the planning scheme, we have very little that we can actually do to challenge that. I take on board the comments made by the proponent that they've tried to move it and make it work for them and for their neighbours. Clearly that hasn't quite worked to the perfect outcome for the representatives here today. Unfortunately, as I've also learned over the time, your view isn't something that you actually own. And when I buy a block of land when I buy a house with a vacant block of land next to me, I'm always concerned about what might happen at some stage in the future. Unfortunately, that day has come for the people living at 17 Quarry Road, that somebody has decided to build on the block next door to them. The building itself fundamentally meets the planning scheme requirements, and as a consequence of that, I can't see any reason why we can emotionally vote against it, but the reality is we're here as a planning authority and need to make decisions as a planning authority, and therefore on that basis I don't think we can vote against it.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, very upsetting when you lose a view. Technically, in Queensland, parts of Queensland, you can't lose your view. There's got laws there to state you still can't lose your view, which we probably, in some cases, we do need in Tasmania. That's my opinion. But this meets the planning scheme. It's good that the builders, the owners that want to build, have tried to make it better. But I'm sorry, the view, you don't own it. So that's the way it's got to be. So we've got to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker?
Yeah, having had some understanding of what's gone on here and the effort that at least the proponents have made to discuss with their neighbours, I would like to obviously acknowledge that and encourage that on every level, you know, because they have made some concessions. I know that the people that are having their view impacted can see that, you know, with expense, they could go further, but that's the problem, that these things become expensive. And I suppose the other problem is the view just happens to be of one of the most iconic sites in Launceston, which is the Alexandra Suspension Bridge. It's not to say that these people couldn't do a small extension themselves, or perhaps a small spire, and and regain some of their view and that sort of thing. But of course, this is the difficulty of the planning scheme, as Councillor Spencer says. We don't have it within our scheme to protect people's view particularly. It's, you could argue unsuccessfully that it's part of your ability, because no doubt it is a spectacular view for anyone who's lucky enough to look down on the gorge like that. I think all councillors would definitely agree that, whilst we hear people when they say this, unfortunately there's very little in the planning scheme, which I've previously expressed, that can be done there. But at the same time, I wouldn't, rule out the possibility that they could, hopefully regain some of that amenity themselves in some future iteration. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Go to 9.3, and I have to leave, and the deputy will now chair the meeting.
Great, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Mayor has exited the meeting. We're on 9.3, 25 Hillary Street, St Leonards, residential construction of an additional dwelling. Are there any speakers for 9.3? There being no speakers, someone to move the DA. Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. A seconder? Councillor Spencer, thank you. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to speak?
Look, I cited the subdivision this morning, the building DA this morning. There were some issues in regards to on-street parking, which were the major issues with the block. There's been subsequent changes to the DA to actually put visitor parking on site. As a consequence of that, it's not impinging on the street at all. As a consequence, I think there is really nothing to see here.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Seconder, Councillor Spencer.
Got an email suggesting about the trees on this bottom side of where the road's going to go.
No, that's the next one.
Wrong one, is it? No.
This one, you were concerned about the cars parking at the
Yeah,
corner.
I'll go back to that one. That one, I did get a phone call about that gentleman that pulls out that street, mentioned how hard it is to come out when someone's parked on the left-hand side of the road. So we did find out if there is a problem, the council can actually go up there later and make no parking on one side of the road. So, yep, I'll fully support that. But we've got that recommendation. If something does happen with traffic bad, they can paint the roads.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councillor Spencer. Any other contributions for 9.3? Councillor Mackenzie, anything further?
Just to note that the comments made by Councillor Spencer actually have nothing to do with the planning scheme. They're all to do with post the planning scheme. So the reality of it is I think this meets the planning scheme's requirements.
Thank you so much. We'll put the vote. All those in favour? That is all councillors present, and the motion is carried at 9.3. As the Mayor returns to chair the remainder of the meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Deputy. We then move on to 9.4, St Leonards Road. St Leonards, someone have to move. Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Spencer. You wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've just put my elbow back into joint. That's good after that little nasty incident there. In dealing with this matter in front of us today, and I'm just going to go straight to the representations, Mr. Mayor, because I guess the major concerns that were raised are addressed in the answers. So if we read through the areas highlighted there where residents are concerned that have made representations, and we also, as Councillor Spencer almost psychically referred to in the previous item, the email from Mr and Mrs Sellers. There's mention of the poplar trees, a significant amount of poplar trees there, and as it says, Mr Mayor, in the responses to the representations, it's not something that the planning scheme deals with. However, the applicant has advised that while some will be removed in the upgrade of the existing stormwater drainage, it is their intent to retain as many as possible, as practicable, I think is the exact words. So that's a positive response to that concern. Obviously, some will need to be moved. The other one, Mr Mayor, and again on the same theme of trees, there was mention a serious concern was raised by a representative about the current pine trees with significant age. The pine trees, Mr Mayor, are actually not on the subject land, and as noted, the applicant seeks to retain as many of the poplar trees as practicable. So the pine trees, the 120-year-old pine trees, aren't actually on the subject land, so that's good. This mention also made reference here on page 56 to possums, frogs and cockatoos that have been impacted by previous happenings in the area, subdivisions and stormwater works. And again, in that, Mr Mayor, it talks about how that will be dealt with, and obviously it's inevitable that some disturbance would occur, but given that cockatoos, possums are still in the area, that would suggest that they have adjusted to that, and it also mentions there that no frogs or other native fauna were observed in the grass drain that was mentioned. So just in summary of that, the prime concern that's been raised with us is around the trees, and it's explained very clearly there, Mr Mayor, in response to those very genuine, legitimate concerns that how that's being dealt with. In terms of this particular application, Mr Mayor, it's obviously something that is compliant, and it's also really important to highlight. Obviously, there are multiple, we had one in the item before, things going on in this area where people are opening up parcels of land or planning to open up, in this case, parcels of land. So I'm very happy to support it, and I'm also happy to highlight those concerns that were raised and the responses to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer? No? All been said. Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. There was just one relevant point which is not actually addressed in the DA, which was in relation to the St Leonard's overarching residential plan going into the future, and I was interested to know the fact that this development actually is fitting in with what that future development may look like and the planning that's gone on to date. So I think that's important, that anything that we're doing where we're approving subdivisions in this area, I think needs to have contextual nature around what we're planning to do in the St Leonard's area. Whilst it may not be directly related to this, I think it's important that there's an overlay of thinking in regards to that, so we make sure that the planning that we make decisions on today actually fit with what we're hoping for the future.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker?
Just a question, thank you, Mayor, in regards to the nature of the drainage that will be being placed in the subdivision, noting that if we are to face increased inundation, times of increased drought as well as increased rainfall, that there is enough provision there. It's what you would call a small gully, I suppose, not really even a creek, but nonetheless, during significant rain, just wondering that those pipes that would be adjacent to where that row of poplar trees are would be sufficient to not create inundation elsewhere.
Richard, or?
Thank you. Following our discussion on the bus trip this morning, I've made further inquiries with our infrastructure officers, and they assure me that the calculations for the pipe size are adequate to meet all expected requirements to capture the stormwater from that catchment into the future.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We now report that we no longer sit as a planning authority. We go to Mayor's announcements, and just to highlight a few. It's been a great few weeks with entertainment in our beautiful city, which has been great with the Earl Arts Centre, the complete works of William Shakespeare. I really was wondering what it was going to be, but it was quite humorous and well done, so I really appreciated that. And then obviously went to, with the Deputy Mayor was there, and Councillor Mackenzie, and Councillor Dawkins, I think, yeah. So we joined in Out of the Shadows, that walk to remember those who had lost their lives to suicide. And that is a worthy event to be at and to encourage people and to just share and listen to some of the people's stories. So it was great to be part of that. And it was really also exciting to be part of the officiating of the Junction Arts Festival in the beginning, and it was a great event. What I really love about Junction is the challenges it has to something different that I haven't thought of before, but also the local artists, that we have a lot of local artists that perform as well and get involved, and they do incorporate that well. Disappointing about the weather, we can't really control that, but it was sad for some, but I know they still got a lot of good crowds and good attendance, especially those things indoor, but even in the park as well. So Junction Arts was a great success again and great for our city. And then obviously one of the highlights always of the calendar of a mayor and of the city of Launceston is the citizenship ceremony. It was great to have that again yesterday, and it was a great event. There was 49 people on the list, but about 45 turned up. We have that occasionally with different events that people don't quite turn up, but still people coming from 17 or 12 different countries, so absolutely fantastic. And to listen to and talk to some of them and see the excitement on their faces is always great for our city, and it's important. And the other thing that I really enjoyed about citizenship ceremonies is when we can together with the group share what the pledge is and just remind ourselves of the pledge to Australia, and I think that's important. And then this morning, I mean, it was really pleasing to be able to officiate at the Migrant Resource Centre's graduation for the aged care program of certificates. New arrivals, they have this program for new arrivals who are learning English, but then they work with different hotels and TAFE and other organisations to teach them, in this case, about aged care and how they can do placements at an aged care facility. So fantastic, and to meet the 12 that were there today and to see the excitement that they have, the fact that they've now got a certificate, they've been trained, and hopefully they're going to get a employment through that in the not too distant future. So congratulations for that event to the Migrant Resource Centre, and it was very great to see 12 new citizens who are now trained into a level that they'll be able to get employment in a sector which is definitely a growing sector and one that I'll be part of very soon. So I'll leave it at that for myself. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Hopefully the Migrant Resource Centre also asked you to join their board. That would be a good use of skill. The three things that I would love to share, and you touched on one of them, but I'd like to take it one step further, that is the Junction Arts Festival. You've commented on the wonderful nature of the event and the local groups, Stompin' and Tasdance, Mudlark, etc., with their involvement. I just wanted to reference how wonderful it is for us to be able to use our parks and reserves for such significant events as Junction, Festivali and the like. But today I wanted to specifically recognise Liz Frankham, whose 8-year association as the chair of Junction comes to an end at their forthcoming annual general meeting as part of their rules. 8 years is the extent of time one can serve. And I think we would all agree that the way that Liz has championed the creation of the Princes Square hub for Junction has been such a transformation of that event. It fits so brilliantly with all the things we desire for our city to be in terms of nighttime economy, activating parks and gardens, creativity and the like. And just to reference Mayor, that wonderful contribution. I also wanted to, on my list, reference Out of the Shadows. It's always such an important event, and I think it exemplifies the work that we are being funded to undertake with other agencies in the suicide prevention space. Just a quiet, humble gathering that takes the time to recognise those that have been lost or those that are dealing with mental health, and our officers did such a great job to create that event again this year. And the final thing I wanted to share was an initiative of our Youth Development Officer, Claudia, who determined that it would be a wonderful initiative and opportunity to bring members of the youth sector together to get to know each other and to forge new professional relationships. And so last week, she, together with the support of the Van Diemen Project, facilitated a most wonderful evening at Drysdale, itself an institution working with young people, where a great number of professionals from the youth sector gathered to realise and connect with other professionals in the space. It was an extension of the work of our Northern Youth Coordinating Committee, which is a great committee of council, and I just wanted to recognise the work of Claudia in facilitating that new initiative.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to note, I think the citizenship ceremony the other day, which you attended, and I did make the comment that this is your last official one that I think you're doing, at least in a public forum. You may have to do some ones for those 4 or 5 that didn't get there the other day, but just the wonderful work you've done over the 11 years that I've been involved in. It's an absolute joy to go along to the citizenship ceremonies and the way you do it and conduct it, and the people just love you and what you bring to that event. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and it was no different on Tuesday. I also attended the Starting Point Neighbourhood House annual general meeting last Friday on behalf of the Mayor and Deputy Mayor who couldn't go. Great people up there doing great things in the community, and just acknowledging the great work that they continue to do in our northern suburbs, and looking forward to the next one, which is the AGM of the Northern Suburbs Community Centre next week, to fill out the whole northern suburbs, but they're doing some great work in that area. And I think the final thing, again, Danny's talking, you've both spoken about Junction, and I can't not do it. I think the first one I went to was in the Big Top out here on Civic Square many years ago. They said the Big Top's no longer. I think it got burnt at some iteration down the track. And I had the joy of catching up with Liz on Monday morning, and the sun was beating down on us. So it's really sad that you get the rain, but that's also part of Junction, and it's meant to be that changing of the season festival, and certainly Junction never lets us down with the changing of the season in how it develops and so forth. And I have to say, one of the highlights to me were the storytelling and the visuals on Chalmers Church and the hall. It was just absolutely amazing. The other events were fantastic, and long may it live.
Thank you. Any other reports on council activities? No? We'll go on to questions from councillors. Councillor Spencer.
Thanks, Mayor. Just one question. I went to a lady's house the other day and she had a broken leg, and she said, I did it on the boardwalk at the seaport. Riding a push bike was that slippery. And we've got signs up in 2 or 3 spots there.
Oh, we can take that on notice.
Yeah, just take on notice.
How many signs we have?
When she went to the hospital to get it done, whatever, 3 months before that, someone broke their arm coming off the bike there too. So.
Yeah, we'll follow up. Any other questions?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from other councillors? No, we'll move on then to item 13.1, Northern Youth Coordinating Committee meeting. Deputy Mayor. Seconded, Councillor Mackenzie. Wish to speak to a deputy?
Very briefly, Mayor, just wanted to highlight the reference again to the Full Gear Motorcycle Program, which has been an incredible initiative that has had great return in terms of social benefits for the young people in the northern suburbs. It's something that I know all of you are aware of, where participants have had the opportunity to acquire their licence through a facilitated program about safety, reduction of hooning, safe riding practices and the like. And the members of the committee were briefed on that in a very innovative presentation, which was very well received. And for your own information, you'll note there that the Youth Network of Tasmania are facilitating a wonderful branding initiative, which is intended to link in with our own branding work here at the City of Launceston, specifically around a brand for young people in the state. We're all very aware of the Tasmania brand. Councillor Mackenzie often wears his branded badge. Well, such has been the success of that branding initiative that they are looking to develop and are using young people from all over the state to facilitate a youth brand, which many of our young people will be involved with.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie? No? Any other councillor wish to speak to the item? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. That is carried. So then we move on to 13.2, Homeless Advisory Committee. Councillor Dawkins moved, seconded Councillor Soward. you wish to speak to Councillor Dawkins?
Yes, please. Councillor Priest did an
You need to
admirable...
stand up on that.
Do I need to?
Yeah,
Why?
it's part of our...
Councillor Priest did an admirable job of leading such an incredibly large committee meeting. It was the largest that I've been present in, and we identified the shared goals, which were really important. We looked at what we could do in the short, medium and long term, and we looked at how we could implement this. I mean, obviously we've got a very short amount of time with this current group of people, but it was decided that we would meet more regularly while we could, because we want to keep the momentum going with this group. Sarah Redmond did an admirable job of facilitating what was really a very complex and difficult discussion. I know you would have heard me speak about the importance of lived experience in this advisory group, and the lived experience members were exceptional. That they were able to speak in a room full of people in this grand place. One of the people on my subgroup had never been in this building before, had never been somewhere like this. And honestly, we were hanging on her every word. She was able to show how the services that were represented in this committee, and so they spoke to what it was that they offered the community, but she was able to say, well, yes, but practically this is how this works. And I think that's really going to be the key to this group and to the success of this group, to understand what council can do. And Dan Ryan did a fantastic job of being able to elucidate that, what the services are already providing, but how it is that they filter through to the community. So it's Sarah's made herself available for anybody who wants to meet in between, so that we can keep this really, really important conversation going. I'm really hopeful for how it's going to all go.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Just to add, and I really appreciate, thank you, Councillor Dawkins, as a member of that committee, the detail that you've provided us with verbally. But I just wanted to acknowledge, Mr Mayor, how fantastic it was that in the life of this council that meeting has taken place, the excellent report there. Critically for me, and Councillor Dawkins touched on that in her remarks, when you look at the representation of this group, it's very significant, Mr Mayor, very significant. And I just wanted to say, it's great to see that work commenced. I get a little frustrated when I open the newspaper or turn the radio on and hear people say nothing's being done out there for this very serious and complex issue. And I look forward to seeing the work of this committee. And as I said, it's fantastic that there is such a broad number of voices in that room being heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, and I'd just like to endorse the work that this has begun. I guess what disappoints me a little bit was the questions that were raised here today. Somebody who chose not to be involved in the process has then decided to come and speak to council about it. I would like that sort of information. It should feed back through our homelessness committee. So I just wanted to make that point, because I think it sort of doesn't pay respect, I think, to the group that we've actually established, and I think that that's an appropriate process for them to use if they wish to voice their views.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Dawkins, for that report and moving that report. I just wanted to note that the work that has been done by our council officers in this area, of course, it might seem, I suppose, easy enough to pull this together quickly and succinctly and all those types of things, but I understand that there is quite a large amount of people on the committee. It involves also working with our neighbouring councils, as well, of course, as the numerous social service groups in Launceston, and just trying to find that commonality and that thread that will pull all that together is, obviously an important part of that committee. So, yeah, I too sort of look forward to hearing more from the committee. As I say, they're going to meet more regularly than our normal committees would. So hopefully that information flow will happen more quickly. But I'm just wanting to congratulate the people who've been behind, including our General Manager of Community, Dan Ryan, for pulling that together in such short time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried, and Councillor Dakin has left the room, so we're down to 7 at the moment. We move on to 14.1, Draft Public Art Strategy. Move Deputy Mayor, seconded Councillor McKenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy?
Thank you, Mayor. I do. The long-awaited draft public art strategy for our council. Its strategic origins obviously listed in the narrative, the rationale that stems from our previously endorsed cultural strategy. A great body of work has been undertaken by the consultant with regard to really, I think, working very diligently with our community to bring us to the point of having this version that we would be sending out for public consultation. We've seen other initiatives throughout the city that have already began to transform some spaces and create an interest in public art, not just in Kings Meadows, but in other parts of the municipality as well. We know that the nature of public art in terms of the definition is quite broad, and we understand that that is linked intrinsically to the cultural strategy. But I think even those councillors that were concerned initially with some of the notions around public art would take heart from the depth that the consultant has provided in terms of this public art strategy, which I think is excellent, setting out obviously some short and quick wins that can be achieved quite quickly, as well as those longer and more strategic things that need to happen to see us fully realise a city that takes advantage of public art. So I would request that councillors support it today, as noted, that we conduct a suitable community engagement process, and then that the future council would endorse that, and then we would get on with bringing it to life.
Thank you. Councillor McKenzie.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just briefly, I'd just like to commend Lou for the work that he's done in pulling all this together as well. I say it's a complex area because public art does need some work on it to make sure that you do get it right and you frame it just in the right way so that the public art actually achieves what we want as a goal, as a city. So I think, you know, whilst I could probably sit there and say this has taken a lot longer than I would have liked it to have done to get to where it's got to, there's probably a necessary process to get to where we have to make sure that we've got the best policy that we can to put to the community to consider. So I'm delighted that we're actually getting it out in front of the public today, assuming we pass this.
Yeah, thank you. Any other Councillor Walker?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And this is one that I would really encourage the public to look into and to read and to make comment on it. And I certainly will be doing that on my own behalf, just asking people to engage in this. I think it is extremely important that we get this right in terms of how we implement the public art with what we already have in our city, which of course is, you know, our parks and our heritage spaces and our natural environment and things like that. Finding that right balance, and of course we've all been to cities in the world where public art does enhance areas, especially areas that, you know, otherwise might be, you know, rather drab. You know, dare I say that I don't think Launceston has so many drab areas, and so I think, you know, that this is my only concern, is that we are careful about where we roll this out. For example, a number of years ago, I remember, I think it was a previous state government that decided to roll out a type of public art project in the Gorge. This is probably going back into the early 2000s, and it probably wasn't the appropriate place for it. But nonetheless, that iteration has passed. So, yeah, all I'm saying is I would really encourage the public to get in behind this, and thank Lou for the work that he has done to bring it to this point, because, as Councillor McKenzie says, complex area, and we need lots of discussion about it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Deputy Mayor, would you wish to close? I will put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand, and that is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Just a reminder, we are down to 7, so if somebody leaves the room, we can't vote on anything, so just so everybody can be aware of that, and hopefully stay in the room. It would be appreciated. Not long to go. 15.1, the lease. Moved Councillor McKenzie. Seconded Deputy Mayor. Councillor Mackenzie wish to
I
speak
saw
to
the
it?
word exemplary tenant, so I think we go forward.
Deputy Mayor? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's all councillors present. That is carried. Lease of the 4th Launceston Scout Group. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie? Deputy Mayor? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Then move on to 15.3, budget amendments. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Dawkins. Thank you. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
Look, I only speak for the point of view it is important that we actually recognise the things that do change in the budget, and the reasons they come before this table is just purely to simply to make sure that we're aware where there are changes up and down in relation to our budget, something we're required to statutorily do. There are elements of this which are things that we have to approve, and there are things that we're just acknowledging what the General Manager or CEO under his delegation has the ability to do that, and simply here for completeness. Good explanations for all the reasons why we've changed things.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins wish to speak. Councillor Walker, question?
Just a question to the CEO, if I may. Thank you, Chair. In regards to caretaker mode, is there my concern with this was just that there is a financial limit to decisions that council can make, but this is not budget adjustment.
Significantly less, yeah. So,
it is.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do need an absolute majority for this one, which is interesting. Deputy Mayor wish to speak?
Just very briefly on one particular topic which we've waited a long time for, just to note the Park Street toilets, which have been referenced earlier in terms of a response, but are also listed there, which gives us a deal of comfort that that work is going to be undertaken. For a long time, we've said that they're not fit for standard for anyone to use, let alone people who are doing it tough in our community. So we look forward to that work being initiated.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Spencer.
The compliance at the theatre, what's all that involved? Is it exit lights, emergency lights?
That's a question, I take it then. Who's that?
No, the compliance program. Theatre.
Louise.
Safety compliance.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Spencer. It's a range of different things around working at heights, around safe access and egress. And I'm not across all the detail, but I know it is a range of different matters that we've been working on progressively over time at the theatre.
Right. There's 92,000 on
yes.
it, new budget. It's come down, which is probably good. But for 92 grand, you should be there. Anyway, if you can just verify what that involves.
Yep, I can provide you with.
That'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? So, Councillor Mackenzie, you wish to close, or can I put the motion? Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is 7. That is carried. Thank you. So 15.4, council appointments to Tender Review and Emergency Management Committee. You've got to move a name as well, do we? I think we do. Was it on there? I thought there's a name not there. That's what I was wondering. So what are you moving? We need to suspend standing orders first, do we?
Well, we had a nomination from Christopher Priest, and I think there was an interest from Councillor Walker as well.
Okay.
So
let's suspend standing orders, and then we'll do that. Councillor Soward moves. Thank you. Is there a seconder? Deputy Mayor, thank you. All those in favour? That is carried. We'll now have a vote. Are there any other interested in that committee position? No. So we have Councillor Walker and Councillor Priest. We'll need to have a vote. Sorry? Just write down the name of the person you are voting for, out of those 2, hopefully. Otherwise it's invalid. Where's Soward go?
Oh, you've got pens.
needs a break. Now's the time to have a 2-minute break. No, nothing longer. Won't take long to count these votes. Thank you, councillors. We now have the votes, and Councillor Krista Priest is the one that's elected. So with the motion now, if somebody could move, we'll go back to move a motion, then we go back to normal, sorry? Yeah, what do we revert? What's the wording? Resume standing orders. So moved Councillor Soward, seconded the Deputy Mayor. All those in favour? That's all councillors present. That's carried. We're now back to 15.4. So moved. I haven't got a motion yet. Moved Councillor Soward and seconded Deputy Mayor on 15.4 appointment, which includes Councillor Priest as the rep. Now, question.
My question is just assume we're not voting on this on the basis that we named in the document? No.
So, do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward?
Well, pretty straightforward, Mr Mayor, and it explains there very, very clearly why this matter is before us today, to the resignation of Councillor Cox. So very self-explanatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. So we go to 16.1, end of term report. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Deputy Mayor. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I do, and I'd just like to thank the officers for the work that they put into putting this together. And I think when you sit there and look at something over a 4-year period, you sort of forget things that happened right back at the very beginning and what's actually been achieved over the last 4 years by this council. So I certainly endorse the voters of Launceston to have a look at what we actually have achieved in relation to the last 4 years. And I think they might be mildly surprised with some of the comments that some people make online about what we haven't done. I'm pretty proud of what this council has actually achieved in the last 4 years. There are many, many things that we've done. We've done cultural strategies, we've had climate emergencies, we've had meaningful engagement with the Aboriginal people. There's been nearly $1 billion worth of development that's occurred. So there's a lot of things that have happened in and around this city, which I think are for the better. And I shouldn't forget to talk about the COVID plan that was effectively sort of managed through the Mayor and the CEO, and the impact that had on the city to keep us going during a particularly difficult time. And I sit back with pride and think what we as a city did for our people to make us as resilient as we could be through that very dark period of the world's history. And I think the people of Launceston, in retrospect, we might have had a couple of hiccups going through the process in one or two of the things that happened. But the reality of it is we survived, and we survived it well, and we've come out the other end a much more positive city for it. And I think, we've been Australia's Tourism Town of the Year, according to What If. So that sort of says things. And we've had people coming to live here, coming to visit here. Our unemployment levels have plummeted in relation to where they used to traditionally be. I think that's a really great setup for the city going forward. So I take this with pride, put it out to the public for them to look at, and I hope that the new council, when they're elected in a month or so's time, can carry on the good work.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just briefly, I would support all of the words that the former Speaker, Councillor Mackenzie, has just said, because I too feel immense pride in what has been achieved. But also, I think importantly, just to take the time to appreciate the setting that that's occurred in terms of great collaboration from the elected representatives being able to work strategically with the CEO and the management team, And I think one would say that in terms of the ability for the 12 elected reps to be able to bring their own flavour, their own ideas, their own strategic projects, and to have those incorporated into what the last 4-year record of achievement looks like, I think is pretty significant. And everyone is able to see the body of projects that kind of have their influence, have their take, have their experience or their leadership on, which I think is really important. You've heard me say before, the work I think that we're doing in the space of our First Nations is really important. And, you know, specific councillors have helped us in that space. So it is, it's a weighty document, and as it should be, because much has been achieved. And I think it's a great initiative of this council 4 years ago to begin an end-of-term report. Obviously becomes a very worthwhile document for an incoming council to look at and to take hold of in terms of the strategic direction for the ensuing 4 years.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Soward.
Only very briefly, thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to echo the previous two speakers, and I guess, and I always say this when the CEO presents his annual general meeting report and PowerPoint, sometimes there's that much that occurs you actually don't remember everything that's happened, and as others have said, it's a weighty document. It sets out a significant amount of information, and I reckon when all of us took office back in 2018, if we'd have foresaw what awaited us with the pandemic, people wouldn't have believed that. And I remember at the time when we'd come out of, I guess I hesitate to say the worst of it, I think Michael Bailey, the Tasmanian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, noted how important the work that we did in that space was to keeping things humming along in our city. So great report, and yeah, very happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Yeah, fully support it. Agree with what the other three speakers spoke about. We did a lot for the community. No rate increases in that epidemic is unbelievable. And we've got the rate increases below CPI. We've done well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker.
Yes, I suppose like one of those multi-choice questions where I somewhat agree with my previous speakers. I would just add that, of course, there is much, much more work to do. And we're at the beginning of a journey in some of these areas. You know, of course, it does augur well for a future council to build on those achievements. And I thank the CEO for the work that he's put in over the term of this council. But certainly, plenty more work there for all of us who may be fortunate enough to be here for the next term. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor McKenzie, wish to close?
Always good when you forget something, you've got a chance to say something at the end. I'd say I think the report is set up, but it's a step forward as well, so I'd just take on board the comments made. I don't think anybody said it was finished. It was still very much an ongoing plan. But I just think that's really important, I think, just to acknowledge the retiring councillors and led ably by our Mayor, and just acknowledge the work that they put in, because they won't be here to see what the next 4 years look like. So Councillor Soward, you're here. Councillor Daking, you're not here. Councillor Cox, you're not here. And Councillor Stodgensek, you're not here. I think I've got them all. And the rest, some of us may not be here, but you know, certainly the retiring councillors, I'd really just acknowledge the work that they've done and their input into the 4 year that we've had. So Mayor, thank you. Under your able leadership, we've achieved a lot.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Oh, that's the closing, wasn't it? Sorry, I've got to be carried away there. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's correct. It's everybody. That's fine. That's carried. We now go into closed council. If you have a motion to do that, I move Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Spencer, that we move into closed council. In open council, somebody happy to move? Councillor Mackenzie moves, seconded Councillor Spencer, that we endorse the decisions taken in closed. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. We now close the meeting. Thank you. Thanks for being here. And note the next meeting is on a Wednesday as well.